Hello and welcome to Canada is Boring. We're still doing some election coverage. Jesse's with me. Hello, Jesse.
Hello. That was weird.
That was a weird noise, Jesse. We have a very special guest. We are joined by Samantha Reush from Apathy is Boring, who you were on our show last election, and we're very excited to welcome you back.
Thank you for having me. I feel like we're election pals at this point. We have to do our every couple of years touch base.
Yeah, welcome back.
It's like once every 5 years, we just reconnect.
like distant cousins at a family reunion.
Yeah. How's it going? Yeah, as the kids 5 years older.
Yeah.
So, Sam, for our listeners who maybe weren't listening all that time ago or skipped that episode, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about Apathy is Boring?
Absolutely. Apathy is Boring has been around actually for 20 years now. I've been with the organization for about 8, but we are, I know it's been a minute now. But we are a youth-led, nonpartisan, democratic engagement organization, and we work with youth.
Sorry, say that again, but slower. I feel like you say that so often.
Like my elevator pitch there?
Yeah, it was good.
So we are nonpartisan.
What does that mean?
We do not support or oppose any of the candidates, parties, or elected officials, I guess, in Canada in our work.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Continue.
It's like, no, you're kicked off the show now. So we work with youth. So we really are interested in just getting young people participate in fewer numbers than older adults in our democracy, whether that's in elections or even in terms of representation in our legislative bodies, parliament, that kind of thing. So we're just focused on getting more young people to show up and to have their voice heard in our democracy. That's basically what we do.
Cool. I thought Apathy was Boring was a podcast. I didn't realize it was a huge organization. That's cool.
Jesse, we had a whole conversation about this 5 years ago.
5 years ago, man. 5 years is hard drinking, okay? Seriously, this is... My memory's not what it used to be.
Yeah, so we may predate the podcast a little bit, but I think it's a great name.
I think it's a great name too. Very close to another name. So, you know.
And I wanted to, how big is your operation right now with the election going on? Like, are you ramped up in terms of like, do you have like agents in every province, that kind of thing?
Agents sounds very like secretive.
Agents of democracy.
A little too adjacent to some of the other conversations that are happening. No agents. We have staff across the country. A lot of that is for our year-round programming. So the things we're doing now are, in terms of the election, are really like volunteer-led. So we're working with youth in our networks across the country. We have volunteers who are going out and doing canvassing work. We're running a vote pledge campaign at the moment. So we really want to get young people committing to voting, making sure they know where, when, and how they can vote. And then we're also hosting dinners across the country. So we have a lot of young people volunteering to get their friends together to talk about the election, talk about the things that they care about, and talk about it in a context that feels like more normal than maybe talking with strangers, to find connections between the things that they care about and what's on offer, so to speak.
I will go anywhere and do anything with the promise of free food. So I think hosting dinners is a great idea.
Just need like a hot dog stand next to the booth, and then as soon as you voted, you get a hot dog.
Oh man, are you kidding me?
They do that in Australia, and it's actually against the law in Canada to provide any sort of reward for voting. So we actually can't do that here.
That's funny.
But I think it's such a great idea, and I do want to. Maybe I'll add that to my next policy platform of
I think you just got to be sneaky with it. When you go into the church basement to vote, and there's always a lineup outside and then into the church, and then you go and you scan and you do your little thing, you whatever, you give your ID and then you go and you vote, and then there's an exit door, and the exit door is usually into the parking lot or something, and right there in the exit door or in the hallway to the exit door, there should just be free hot dogs. Just for the placement, totally coincidental that it happens to be on the exit out of the building.
Do you know what they should have there? You know when they introduce a guest onto a game show and they come running out and there's glitter and lights and music. Once you've voted, you get to run out and there's people cheering.
Oh my God, that would be amazing! Like so many people cheering and confetti, and everyone's handing you hot dogs. Yeah, okay, just throwing hot dogs at you.
Sam, why aren't you writing this down?
I know. I'm like, I'm going to speak to my agents after this. We need to have like
just spraying mustard all over the place.
You know what though? I was voting. I don't know which level of government it was in, but it was actually really sweet. My polling station just happened to have someone who was like really keen to celebrate first time voters. So every time there was like a first time voter that came in, they would like tell everyone and everyone would clap. And I was like, this is so sweet. Like, I think it was a little overwhelming for some of the
I was going to say, it's like, hey, let's publicly embarrass as many children as we can. Like,
yeah. But like, it was sweet. Like, and then everyone else standing there was like, yeah, okay, cool. Positive affirmation.
So you said you've been with Apathy is Boring for like 8 years, and the organization is 20 years old. So like, how has youth voting changed? Are you seeing like an upswing like at the moment with this election, or is it kind of business as usual? Or
yeah, I think this election's a bit unique. And it's funny because I would have definitely said that about the last one too. So I'm like, when do we get a normal election again? But obviously last time we were in the middle, I'm sure you guys remember, of little thing called the COVID pandemic. So that one was
rings a bell.
Yeah, it's like, did we all memory hold it? That's like, I don't want to think about that time. No, but it was a bit unique. Like for us, we couldn't go out and do our normal canvassing work, for example. So like so much more of that work was digital. We were doing so much more social media. We're doing a lot of that anyways.
Like instead of knocking on doors, you'd like walk down the street with like a paintball gun and like knock on people's doors that way. And then you've got like a mega bullhorn, like, hey, vote. And then like, yeah, thanks. And you go to the next door, thwack, thwack, thwack. Like, I don't know. That's
6 meters, or what was it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
2 meters apart.
Paintball guns so handy in that situation.
You still got the paintball gun when you're telling them to vote, so it still looks really threatening and menacing.
I should really put you guys in charge of our strategy.
Honest to God, like seriously, like why haven't you already?
You'd be out of money within the first month. They all got paintball guns.
We'd be heavily hosting dinners every single day. It's just Reese and I hashing ideas. Yeah. All the money would be going to lobster and steak and lovely dessert. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. It sounds ethical.
But we come up with great ideas like the paintball. Yeah. Like that's.
Yeah. There
anyway, tell us about this election of being unique. Sorry, it's just been derailed.
No, okay.
That's what I'm here for.
Yeah. So we had the COVID context that we're all forgetting about. But I think this one, like for obvious reasons, we're seeing so much sort of this external threat scenario where people, as we're all aware of, that is really changing the dynamic. And I think it's also, I think, unique in the sense that as long as I've been doing this work, at least, like my common sort of commentary is like
external threat that we're all aware of. Do you mean like he who shall not be named?
Yes, he who shall not be named. Yes,
who is either Trump or Voldemort, like one of the two. I don't know.
One of the two.
Yeah.
And so I think that I often sort of have criticisms around the fact that the political campaigns don't always necessarily speak to issues that young people care about that directly in a campaign. But I think that that's not really the case this election. Like, I think, of course, young people also care the same way older Canadians do about what's happening outside of our borders and how that's impacting us and the sort of like those dynamics. But I also think that like so much of the conversation has been around opportunities, the economy, affordability, housing. Like those are the number one issues that we are consistently hearing from young people right now. So I'm like, I wonder. So we're kind of testing the theory. It's like, if the campaigns really do speak to those issues, will young people show up? And like, I'm hearing a lot of people telling me like, oh my God, I know how important this election is. Like, I really need to get my act together and like actually show up. So I think it's interesting. I'm hopeful.
Well, I mean, no, as far as who should we vote for, that's always been a topic of heated debate for decades for everybody. But if you stand back and look at the bigger picture, getting more people to vote who typically don't vote and have them feel good about voting is, in the long run, I say, a much better idea. A much better, it's just beneficial in general, you know? So even if the youth of today come here and they all vote Polyev and our country burns to the ground, at least they'll be voting, you know? So that's
Sam's got to be by.
I'm not.
Can't be
I know you are. I know. That's why I'm poking the bear. I just want to poke it.
Well,
Sam doesn't have an opinion.
yeah, I don't have an opinion on it.
I know you don't.
Yeah.
I know you can't say you don't have an opinion. That doesn't mean you don't have an opinion.
I mean, I vote. I vote like everyone else. No, but honestly, I think that it is important, especially in an election campaign, if you're talking about people who have really low trust in our democratic institutions, to have some resource that they know doesn't have an agenda. Genuinely, like, you can argue that the political parties are really good at engaging their own base. And sometimes that means they want to, and this is all parties, they want to engage their own base and they want to discourage people who aren't voting for them to, like,
right.
keep
Yeah,
away.
of course. And I don't like
We
that.
need institutions or groups like ours. I'll give us those flowers, like, who are actually genuinely like, hey, we don't have an agenda. We just want you to, like, have the information you need and feel
And
good
I love
about.
that. I love that. I think that's fantastic. And I think you're right. Like,
Yeah.
we do need more, like, I don't know. I think the games that politicians play genuinely piss me off. It's because they don't care. It's all about their own gain, a lot of them, not all of them, which is why, like, when a while back, we interviewed the leader of the Green Party in Alberta, and he was, at the end of the podcast, he was convinced me that, like, listen, we may never win a ton of seats, but I can guarantee you this, that the Green Party will take your vote more seriously than any other party out there. And I'm like, oh shit, I think he actually has a point there. And so I think that's, like, a big part of why people aren't voting, is they don't think their vote really fucking matters. And, like, that's why I vote out of obligation and guilt, not because I think my vote is actually going to make a fucking difference, but this election, maybe it will. Who the hell knows? So
I think the way that you're describing it, though, is honestly the feeling that a lot of people have. Like, I don't think that that's like like your perspective on this is not uncommon.
No, I don't think so. I don't think it is. Yeah, I think it's very common.
And I think that there's solutions that we know. Like, I mean, we've had this sort of, like, flirtation with electoral reform for a very long time in this country. A lot of groups have worked really hard to sort of, like, break down these concepts and why it would improve, like, just to the general public, why it would improve our democracy and how it would improve our democracy. Like, we basically throw out half the vote. If you don't vote for the winner, your vote doesn't do anything functionally. So, like, we have a system that sort of reinforces the perspective that you have.
Yeah. No, and I do hate the fact that what is it? Strategic voting is a thing. I don't like that. Like, I can't vote for the party that I want to vote in because I have to vote for the party that's going to win to make sure that this other party doesn't get in. I hate it. I hate it so much.
Well, I think as well, the point you're getting to, Sam, as well, like, if 52% of the people vote Liberal and 39% voted Conservative, and then the remaining percentage was split between the rest, but winner takes all, there's that thing of, like, you then have 39% of the population who are kind of pissed off and disappointed and feel like they don't have a horse in the race. Whereas, if you have that proportional representation, when they collect up all of those Conservative voters and give them a representative, like, collectively across a few, it's just a much better system. And then it just means that, like, you can still collectively, and the Welsh Senedd, which is like the Parliament in Wales, that's like, they did something very similar to that. They did have, like, a more proportional representation, a system of more proportional representation. So you would find that, especially in, like, European elections.
How did it work? Like, no, how did it work out is what I meant. Like,
so you'd have, like, constituents who are like, this is my constituency, but then they would tally up the votes for other parties, and they would have, like, a regional person who was kind of like or a couple would add it on from other parties that were maybe, like, didn't get a seat but were voted for by still a large percentage of the population. I don't know all the kind of, like, the mechanics behind it, but it kind of made sense, because you were like, a lot of people there voted for this person or voted for this party, but they didn't get anyone, so they would kind of then, like, bump up a few extra bonus people who would fill in those gaps. So yeah, it kind of works. So if you come second, it doesn't mean you're not going to see someone who's you're not going to have any representation at all, which is cool. Right. Sam, we were talking about Gen Z and like their voting patterns, and about how, you know, like it seems like Gen Z men are leaning towards voting conservative. But I was interested to see, like, do you have you heard anything about like kind of Gen Z men being more enthused about voting, or is do you know, with people on the ground speaking to people, is it? I think it's the most exciting part of this election in terms of like demographics, personally. But
Yeah, it's funny. I think that there is, and I don't know if, and again, like not even from a partisan perspective. I was actually at my local pub like 2 weeks ago, and I was having a
What's your?
conversation.
Oh, I was going to ask you what your local pub was, but you probably don't want to let people know, or the neighborhood which you live. Yeah.
If you'd like to buy Sam a drink, like,
Please pop by. We can chat about the election. No,
They will too if you want. Like, we can tell them, and they'll show up. You think we're joking?
But so I was just sitting there actually talking about the election with a friend, and this guy, like 18 years old, pops up behind me like jump scare, and is like, "Are you talking about the election?"
What?
And I was like, and he goes, "Are you talking about the election?"
Was it like
I'm
this?
like,
Was it just like?
yeah, literally. Yeah. And I was like, ah! And so
For those who are listening, that was a YouTube. You just watch it on YouTube. You'll see what we're talking about, dear listener. I just popped up out of nowhere.
yeah. So he pops up and starts talking to me, and he's like, "It's my first time voting." And I was like, "Oh, congratulations!" Like, and so he started asking me,
Was he 18? What's he doing in the
yeah,
bar?
he was like 18. Oh, I live in. Oh, so for context, internet pops. I live in Quebec, and the drinking age is 18. So
Oh,
he
that's
was,
true.
in
That's
fact,
true. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
a much
forget
more
that it's
reasonable
not.
age.
Yeah, 19 is such an odd. Anyways,
I know, it's weird.
such an odd age. Anyways, so no, he was legal to vote and to drink, to be clear. And he popped up, and so we started talking about it. And he was actually quite nervous, and he started telling me about how seriously he was taking this election, how he didn't know where to go find the information, and like, you know, like all these things. And then his friend popped up on the other side of him and just went, "Mark Carney!" And I was like, okay, like, this was very like, it was such a brief but energetic interaction, and then they just like poof, disappeared, and I was like, what is going on?
This
is highly anecdotal, but
it's great anecdotal though.
I love that.
Yeah,
that's great.
I think I all that to say, we're also getting so much interest from, like, we've had a lot of more interest from young men more recently in our programs. Like, I think if we were to just like put a bat signal up and not do anything, we would probably attract a lot of university educated young women for the most part. But we do make an effort to try and reach out to young men, and I feel like we've had so much more uptake. They want to host dinners, they want to talk about, the subjects can be different, they can diverge, you know, from young person to young person, but we have people who are like, yeah, I really want to host a dinner and talk about, you know, innovation and tech and entrepreneurship. Like, that's an interesting subject to me. So it's like, I think if you kind of leave the ground open and you kind of say like, hey, like, we want to know what you care about, and you know, then they show up, you know.
That's pretty cool.
So I just want to talk about Apathy is Boring again for a second. Is the organization, the goal of the organization to get people who aren't normally voting interested in voting? Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like, that's kind of the idea.
That's exactly what it is, Jesse.
Is that exactly what it is? Okay, yeah. I wasn't sure. Yeah.
Those are literally Sam's words 18 minutes ago.
Yes. Yeah. So that is, now that we've come full circle, that is what we do. But we're also sort of, to your point, we're sort of interested in creating a healthier democracy in general, and we think that young people.
How would you go about doing that though? And like, because I am a very disengaged, very
doing what they're doing, Jesse.
No, I know, but like. No, well, I have a point about it. It's not just what she said so far. I want to ask about like more.
Yeah.
About more about like the values and why, and your belief system, and I'll tell you why. Because I have a belief about North American politics, at least. I can't speak for European, and this is a belief of mine. It sounds very conspiracy theory-esque. But
this will be good.
No, you and I have talked about this before, Reese. I've talked to you about this a lot, right? No, we have. I don't think that the system of government, the system of politics that we have, is running in the same way that it's being presented. I think that it is being presented in a way that it's like a game for them. Okay, I believe that. Now, of course, like I'd love to be proven wrong with this. Would love it if an economist or someone came out and who like worked in government and knew exactly how this works. But I think that in the whole of a government, of all the different things that need money, that need funding, there's not enough to go around at any given time. Not only that, but having slight deficits in very specific pockets, whether it be education, whether it be housing, whether it be you name it, okay? It creates drive, it creates demand. And I think every single time a party gets in, they know ahead of time that there's only so much money to go around and someone will suffer, okay? And that someone typically belongs to a certain demographic who votes a certain way. And so one party gets in for a while and certain things will flourish and other things will not. And then after a number of years of the certain demographic that is suffering from having whatever it is that they're typically would like to have not be funded as much, then another party comes along and says, hey, it's election time. We'll provide the money for the stuff that's been suffering. Low housing, smaller tax, whatever, blah, 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 education, etc. You name it. We'll fix that. And then it just bounces back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, decade after decade after decade. And I think politicians know this. And I don't think so. Like right now, we're like, oh my God, we got to vote to fix this. Really, it's been done before, decade after decade after. Nobody's looking at the big picture. Nobody. They're only looking at the needs of right effing now. I have this need. I need groceries and I need housing. This person's providing that. I'll vote for him. They don't step back and look at what's been happening for the past 50 to 100 to 150 years, where it's just been bouncing back and forth and nothing's really changed.
I think you're giving them too much credit, Jesse.
Yeah,
I don't think it's like a mastermind puppetry thing. I think it's just people who've been in it for so long just know how the system works. Well, that's all. I think it's like a complex system, but once you're in it for long enough, you just step back and see like, oh, right, it's just a system and it needs the fuel. It needs our voters. And we do these things. We say these things. We run attack ads. We bounce back and forth. I know my time will come to no longer be prime minister. I know his time will come to be prime minister, whatever it is. I think it's a system and they all just kind of know how it works. And they act like it's so effing urgent that people vote for the matter, what's happening in matters right now, right today. We got to fix this. Vote for that. But in the end, if you stand back and look at the whole thing, I think they just know that this is just how it works. And they're creating a false sense of urgency just to get people to vote on stuff that they know is going to happen anyway. This is because if you're working in a system that people don't really fully understand unless you're in it and you're working in it for decades, you're going to notice patterns and you're going to
like a bubble. Like you're talking about the
essentially, but you're going to notice patterns that people don't. Yeah. So like getting people to care about a system that is essentially a giant game where they're just pulling the strings and doing the things that they know what's going to happen. And they all know ahead of time, like they don't know what's going to happen, but they know the system. Eventually liberals will get in. Eventually conservatives will get in. Eventually this will get funded. Eventually this will get defunded. It just happens. If you look back a decade, 2 decades, 3 decades, it's the same pattern, but nobody looks at the patterns. And so when youth of today, myself, for my whole life, when I go and vote, I don't feel like my vote matters. And I see what's happening. I just see the bigger picture. Like what are your thoughts on this? On convincing people like, no, this is real. And these politicians, they really do care. I swear they care. They're not just doing this for their own game. And they're not just doing this because this is the game that they have to play. They really, really care about you, which I feel like most people don't believe that. And then when they vote and then they see what they end up doing with their votes, they're like, oh yeah, no, I was right. They don't actually care. Like, do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm not the only one who feels this way about this system. And we're trying to be convinced to vote and to join a system that we thought was broken. And then we find out, oh, it is broken. And then the next time they come around, like, hey, you should do it again. Like, should we really? I guess, so I feel like there's a lot of people who have very similar sort of like, this system is broken and why should I vote?
Yeah. Okay. So
it was a long rant. Sorry about that.
I was going to say that I'm going to wait for the world's longest question.
Because no, that was fine. It's your podcast. You can talk as much as you like. No, I think that there's a couple of things there that I think, first of all, I think a lot of people do feel the way that you do. And I think that that's normal. There's certain elements of our system, I think, that actively reinforce, to your point, what you're saying. And I think if we
Well,
actually,
doesn't that make it somewhat true?
well, no, but I'm what I'm saying is I agree with you. I think that there are things that it's like a reasonable person would come to that conclusion. Like, you know, you look with your own eyeballs and you go, well, this issue hasn't been addressed, or these promises are made and not kept, or like, is this realistic? Like, people are trying to assess a lot of information right now, as we're heading up to the election. So I think that that's fair. And I also think that there's sort of two important pieces here that we don't talk about
Okay.
enough, I think, in Canada. One being that democracy and the system that we have don't actually need to be tied together. The concept of democracy, the idea of people governing, is distinct from the system that we have. So there are elements of the system that we have that actively reinforce the dynamics that you're talking about. I think something like it's so rare that Canadians agree like across the board on things. Like, we did some polling last year and like 95% of young people agreed that like it matters to them to be a good citizen. Like,
Love that.
whatever that means to them. It's
I
like,
mean, that's very Canadian.
It's very Canadian, but also Fair Vote Canada did some research a couple years ago where something like 97% of Canadians, so we're going even higher than our number. 97% of Canadians want a system that encourages parties to work together in a collaborative way to protect and advance the public interest.
100% I agree with.
So
I'm included in that 97%.
Same. So I think that part of being in a democracy is being able to look at this system and say, something about this isn't working.
Right.
People don't trust it. We have issues around transparency. We have, you know, like the way our ballots are counted is not leading to representation that we feel actively reflects the way that we feel, whether that's regional diversity. Like, I come from Quebec. I know what that feels like. People from Alberta also feel these, you know, and I'm sure it's the same in the Maritimes. Like, there's regional elements, there's all of these pieces. So I do think that like there is an appetite here for us to have this conversation in a bigger way. I also think the people who have control over the levers of whether or not that change is made,
yeah,
have a conflict of interest in changing that. So it's even harder.
Of course.
You need a broader base of support to even get there in the first place. And then on the other side, and this is like more my pet theory. So like I love it. Let's get into it. Conspiracy brain for a second. I think that we have this sort of legacy in Canada of like the concept of an aristocracy. And the concept of
I'm not familiar with aristocracy. If you could.
Reese, take it away.
Essentially, a ruling class that is kind of born to lead and is rich. They go to different schools from the wider population. They don't socialize with the wider population. There's kind of their own class of people that exists above everyone and runs everything. Just look at the UK and like if you
were talking like royalty, essentially
royalty, but like also historically it would have been barons and dukes and all those kind of lords and ladies, all these like kind of aristocratic titles. Essentially, nobility would be the phrase you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. So this idea that there's this group of people who sort of are the natural governing class, maybe we'll put it that way. I mean, we still have it baked into our system in the sense that we have an appointed Senate, and we have this whole ecosystem of like academic thought and permission structure that sort of tells us that that's okay for various reasons. And like, I'm not here to debate Senate reform or like whatever, but the point is that I think we have this idea that our system needs to moderate the public. It needs to weed out the more extreme elements or what is seen as more extreme. It needs to like sort of contain the wild nature of the public and moderate it into a system that kind of comes more towards the middle. And I think what a lot of young people see and what I hear a lot, and I think even what you're saying, Jesse, is like, it's really a feeling that like there's a very narrow scope of what is actually like we're actually talking about in terms of policy or goals and objectives. And there's a lot of the Canadian public that feels left out and that their perspectives aren't represented and nothing changes in the way. And then you add in urgent things like climate change, like the economy and affordability, housing. You add in these things that feel very existential and people start to get really like, they're like, you know, looking and they're like, how are you not doing anything here? And there's this sort of like paradigm that exists in the bubble, this like idea of how things are supposed to work that is completely misaligned with what most people think or want. And so I think when that happens, people start to lose their faith and their trust and all of the trends that we're seeing. And it's like, there are things that we could do to make this better. We know this. Like
Right.
this exists. It's a matter of people deciding that this is actually the direction we want to go and sort of forcing it. But the system itself is not leading, it is blocking some of these things that you're talking about.
For sure. Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah. And the system, the people who have this, like, they don't want the system to change because that would mean they'd lose power or money or both, you know? So, yeah.
I agree with you on Senate reform, because in the UK they have the House of Lords, which like was hereditary for a long time. You know, so essentially your dad would die and then you would go to the House of Lords and take his place, which would, you know, was the UK's version of the Senate. They like phasing out. I don't know if they finished phasing out or they were phasing out hereditary lords. But again, House of Lords are appointed, and like they're appointed by the Prime Minister, like largely speaking, aren't they? So like elected politicians get to choose who is in the Senate as well, which I find bizarre. I find the head of state of, you know, the Canadian head of state is chosen by the king, or, you know, it's kind of, or I suppose it's a representative of the king, but chosen with the prime minister. It's kind of messy and it's not kind of clear. There's not like for people to go, who is the head of state in this, you know, who's leading this country. There's so many layers that people aren't invited to take part in, I guess. And it happens behind closed doors. You get a press release and you go, oh, I guess that's the thing now.
Yeah. And I think that makes people not trust it.
Exactly.
Like what's happening in that room with the closed door, and like, and again, like in an age where you could pick up your phone and order a pizza to a park if you want to not you can, it's hard for people, especially I think younger people, to exist in both spaces where they can have anything immediately on one hand, and then on the other hand it's like, oh no, but we have this like very archaic sort of system, and like if we want to keep our democracy, that first piece that I was talking about, the people governing, and not drive people towards the idea of like, oh, maybe some really strong person can just come in and fix all of this. Like that's where it goes. If we want to keep that democracy, then we have to fix the system that operates it. Like the actual software that takes all of us, or the hardware, all the software being like how our opinions translate into the direction that the country goes. And that's the piece that's broken.
Do you have any ideas on how to fix it? Because we can point at a burning, smoking car and say that thing is broken, but I don't have any idea how to fix it. You know, like, do you personally have any ideas on how to fix the broken system? And how? You got lots? What's your top?
Just waiting for the opportunity to share.
No, no one ever wants to talk about this stuff with me, guys. No, but no, I so there's a couple of things. I think so. For example, every time there's an election, I have a lot of conversations with a lot of different people about why young people don't vote. There are some really clear and easy things we can do. One of them is extending voting rights to 16 and 17-year-olds who are ready to vote cognitively. We have all the science now. It's like they're at the developmental stage where they can process cold cognition, think through decisions, and make a decision like who to vote for. They're also in civics class and often still living at home, which means that they're more connected with their families. They're at their childhood home, which makes it easier for them to register. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. But anyways, the point is that we know all of that. And so if we really cared about youth voter turnout, we could do that. We lowered the voting age in 1970 from 21 to 18. We could do it again, and it would transform this issue. So you're talking about the burning car and being like, what can you just like, well, okay, if we all really care about the youth voter turnout, we could do this. Like, straightforward.
I want to play devil's advocate and make a stupid point and go, well, that's a slippery slope. What's next? Babies voted? I don't know. I'm sure someone out there will think that. Honestly. I think it's a great idea.
No, it's an interesting point. It's an interesting topic for debate, honestly, because you're right. Well, at what age is too young? You know,
I think 16 is ready. I think like a lot of people are politically minded at 16.
Yeah. I also think that like the way that our charter works in Canada, everyone in Canada who's a citizen over majority, or no, sorry, the charter does not say that. Everyone who's a citizen has a right to vote in Canada. It's part of our Charter of Rights. And so there's the section of the charter that implies like imposes the reasonable limitations on those rights. So that's where the legislation come in and say, okay, we don't feel that like 16 and 17-year-olds are ready to vote. But it's not the way to prove, like, you can't actually impose that law on 16, 17-year-olds unless you can prove that it's in the public interest to not allow them to vote. And I just don't think that we're there. Like, I don't think that you can actually make that case.
No.
And there's actually a court case right now where some young people are actually suing for the right.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah.
My 8-year-old was telling me all about Mark Carney and what he's going to do, because Mark Carney has been targeted him through in between his Fortnite videos and the ads, and he was like, Dad, I was like, yeah. He was like, have you heard about this Mark Carney? I was like, well, he's going to build as many houses as World War II. I was like,
wow.
Is Mark Carney ad? Are they coming up when you're watching Fortnite videos? He's like, yeah. I was like, do you like him? He was like, he seems all right. So it's good to know that Mark Carney's reaching out to the 8-year-olds.
To the 8-year-olds, he's really playing the long game. Yeah, no, it's. But so there, that's an example. Like, you can name a number of things. Like I said, electoral reform. There's a lot of people in this country that were very disappointed after 2015 as to what happened there when they decided not to move forward with that. I think that broke a lot of trust. I also think that, like, it's probably time for us to be having that conversation in a more serious way. But there's also little things like, we're having a lot of conversations around ethics disclosures right now, and like and asset disclosures, like making that more accessible and available to the public.
What are
So when you're elected as an MP, you have to submit a form that goes to the ethics commissioner that says, like, here are all the assets that I have. And the ethics commissioner holds on to that to make sure that you're not, you don't have a conflict of interest. So, like, you're not like passing laws that would directly benefit you without someone.
Yeah,
I got you.
Or make you money. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen this in the US. Sidebar, there is a really funny company that actually has a stock index or fund where you can like buy into it. And it actually just buys and sells based on Nancy Pelosi's. Have you guys seen this?
No.
We're trading, and it outperforms like many other funds.
That's
because
hilarious.
Yeah, they have so much insider information.
It definitely is insider trading.
We are so, but also the reason that they know this is because every 30 days, every member of Congress has to file a report that is then made public. So any journalist, any person can go and look. And we always kind of like talk shit on the US there's lots of reasons to do it, but on this matter, they are extremely transparent.
Yeah.
And they have a searchable database that you can go to and find out the holdings of any member of Congress, and it's updated every like 30 days. So
that's cool. All right. I like that.
days.
I appreciate I actually didn't know that at all. That's really quite cool.
Yeah. But it builds trust. It makes people aware, and they can assess for themselves whether or not they feel like someone's, acting or has a conflict of interest, or it just, in a vacuum, I think there's so much space for misinformation. So like sunlight, best disinfectant, put it out there. I also think that we can make changes to, our digital regulations, thinking about like who's allowed to, or what kind of money is flowing through social media at any given time around like, we have so much disinformation that is so opaque around like where money's coming from, what money's changing hands, who's funding like digital campaigns in Canada that talk about Canadian political issues. So I think there's definitely some work to be done there. But I think all in all, what you've said, Jesse, basically is that like, I just don't trust that what I'm being promised is going to happen. And I think that we need to create
a little more complicated than that, but that's essentially the gist is like, it's not just that I don't think that it's going to happen, or I can trust I think that the politicians who have been in the game for long enough know that it's exactly that, a game. They know it's a game, and they know how to play it, and they're playing it off like it isn't a game. Like, there are urgent matters that they have to, but they just, you know what I mean? I feel like they're doing whatever they can to just keep the game going, because it's the game that they're playing and they like playing it. And it's really disheartening, honestly.
Yeah, you need someone who's going to come in who's outside of that game, who's never been part of that game.
Like Carney.
Yeah, but I mean, it depends. Is he going to rattle? Does he want to rattle cages? Who knows?
Who
But
knows? That's the thing. Who knows? He's
I
a
was
wild
gonna
card.
I was going to say, I can't remember which small European country it is, but they have political campaigns are publicly funded, which means that
Mhm.
if there's an election, you get a fixed amount of money, and they go, "Here you are. This is your.
love that.
This is the money you spend." There's no one is allowed to give them outside money or influence or anything like that. And they go, "Here, these are your slots on TV. These are your slots on the radio." And every registered political party has an equal amount of money
That's
and
incredible.
resources.
That's
to throw
amazing.
in.
Do you guys want to hear something funny? We used to have per vote subsidy public funding for our elections in Canada, and it got taken away.
Of course it
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
But what?
And
Who took it away?
I believe it was I don't remember the year. I think
Do you know
after
who-
2011, I would say.
Do you know
I
who
think it
took
was
it away?
I think it was during the Stephen Harper years.
Oh, really? Oh, that's surprising.
Yeah.
He was such a
Steve-
nice,
Stevie
wholesome
Harp.
man. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good old
But
Stevie Harp.
we could the funny thing about the way our system, this is another area I think you're right, Reese, like that could be pretty transformative, especially for smaller parties, because basically we do have some pretty good regulations in Canada, like companies and unions and that kind of, like, you have to be an individual to donate to a political party in Canada, and we have limits on how much that is. It's around like $1,200 a year, and then you can give extra to leadership campaigns and stuff like that, but it's pretty small when you look at the US. But the thing is that we are still sort of publicly subsidizing because people get tax credits for making those donations.
Oh, that's
So
true.
so we're still publicly funding to an extent our elections through these tax credits, but basically it's only the people who can afford to give
Yeah.
Right.
that are benefiting from that and are directing all of the funds. So
Yeah. Interesting.
I actually think we should bring back the per vote subsidy and
Yeah.
lower substantially the amount that any individual can give, because like the median donation in Canada is something like $70. So make it low and then allow the per vote subsidy to dictate like where that money goes. Again, it would just be a better, more democratic way of directing the funds as opposed to allowing like a small group of people to do
What's that system called? What's the name for the system you're talking about?
it's the per vote subsidy. So there's like a dollar amount where basically if I vote for a party, and there's usually some conditions on that, like they have to get a certain, I think, amount of the vote or whatever. I can't remember all the details, but you vote, and then for that vote, you get a couple of dollars. Like when I started voting, that was still the case. So I remember my father saying to me like, "Oh, even if you're not sure, like whatever, whoever you vote for, at least we'll get a couple of dollars for it." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's cool. I feel like my vote is doing something," to your point around like not doing anything.
It's funding the party you support as well. I was going to say,
exactly.
there is stuff that Canada is getting right though. So I got family visiting, and we were walking through Micmac Mall in Dartmouth.
I'm really sorry.
I like it. It's good. They got decathlon. They got a Cinnabon. If you're into Cinnabon,
Woody, the animated cannibalistic Christmas tree that eats children once a year.
What is going on in Dartmouth?
It's a magical place.
You should look it up. Woody the Talking Christmas Tree. It's been a thing at Micmac Mall for decades, and it is a creepy motherfucker.
And we were walking through the shop mall, and we walked past a voting booth, a voting station, and everything. And my dad was like, "Oh, there was a voting booth. I thought the election was the end of the month." I was like, "Yeah, you can vote now, because in the UK it's still voting day. You still turn up on that one day where you're like, oh, I gotta go before work, I've got to go after work, and if it's raining, turnout crumbles for some parties, or for young people it's hard to get off work to do that, or if you do shift work. So there's you can strategically place, if you're like old people vote for you and they're retired, you can strategically place the day of the poll to kind of like favor you in a certain extent, or even if it's when students.
Hey, look, a polling station showed up at this bingo hall suddenly.
Exactly.
What a coincidence.
Or if students aren't home, if students are not at home where they're registered, you can go, well, students are going to be in session, they're not going to be able to vote, so that helps reduce the younger vote. So Canada, the fact you can vote leading up to it is brilliant, and not a lot of places have that. They still rely on like maybe mail-in votes for people who have accessibility issues, but largely everyone votes on that one day.
Yeah, and we don't talk about this enough. Like, as much as I'm talking about systemic issues, one of the ones that we do not have in Canada is election administration. Like, Elections Canada is one of the like standard bearers for like how to administer an election. They're the oldest, like I think the oldest independent electoral management body like in the world. Like, we have an amazing system that protects our elections from partisan influence as much as humanly possible.
How so?
So they're independent. Their budget is not dependent on the parliamentary system. They have sort of a separate, what do they call it, a statutory budget, which I think is like separate from like the annual budget process. They are completely nonpartisan. They report back to Parliament, but they're not directed by Parliament. So even things like, you hear about gerrymandering in the US where like locally you'll have like a partisan group from one party or the other that will strategically redraw the line. You've seen some like super wacky looking districts where they like redraw it to try and get as many votes for their party as possible in the next election. And so like that process is really politicized. Whereas here, every 10 years after the census, Elections Canada redraws the electoral districts. Like, this is the first election we're going to have with 343 ridings instead of 338. So based on population changes, movement, whatever, they redraw the lines, but they do it in an explicitly nonpartisan way to adapt, to make sure that people are well represented and properly represented.
That's amazing.
But not in a way that changes the outcome of the election, which is really important. So we're like super fortunate to have that, and I feel like we don't talk about it enough. So as much
I had
as
no idea, honestly. That's really cool.
So things to celebrate.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. And I think that we're able to hold the elections that way is important. They also become like the number one employer in Canada during an election, which is crazy.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
It's like a feat. But yeah, I think there's stuff to celebrate. I think Elections Canada is one of them. I think we're really
cool. I didn't know that about that. That's real. And those are the guys that hand out free hot dogs. Is that right?
They're the ones that'll tell you cannot hand out free hot dogs.
They're the ones who'll hit the hot dog out of your hand.
I've tried.
You're about to take a big old bite and it just flies away.
Yeah. So no, I'm pro hot dog too, though. Maybe we should start a campaign.
Pro hot dog. I'd hate to try and work out who's anti hot dog, but
I want to go get some hot dogs now. God damn it.
And a pizza.
I'm gonna go to Costco.
Yeah,
I'm gonna go to Costco.
Costco hot dog. So good.
Hot dog.
This episode is brought to you by Costco. I'm joking. Costco hot dogs. What are you most excited about this election? What like data are you going to be looking at as an organization, but also as you? Like, what are you excited about for
me.
this?
As a person, I think so. I think a couple of things. Like I said before, I think that it's really interesting to see the parties like speaking about these issues that I'm also hearing young people care about, and I think I'm seeing that translate into people paying attention. So like fingers crossed. I hope that pattern just continues. Like we sort of reverse this vicious cycle of like, young people don't vote, so politicians don't talk about the things they care about, so young people don't vote. Like maybe we can start to have a virtuous circle the other way. Like that would be cool. Because young voters are like the largest voting bloc in Canada. It's like this huge untapped, potential there. So I'm excited to see what that yields. I think I'm really excited because I feel like as a country, we're having this conversation around what it means to be Canadian and what it means to be Canada in a way that's distinct from other countries. And I think part of that and a big focus of it has been on the economy for obvious reasons. And how are we breaking down our interprovincial trade barriers and like doing all of those things, which is really important. But I also think there's this conversation that needs to happen around our democracy and the systems and how it actually functions. And I'm really hopeful that we might get there.
Yeah. That's interesting. I like that. Okay. Yeah. Well, now I've got a little bit more hope.
I think that's the other thing is that like when you see like what is happening south of the border, I think it makes people really value stability and institutions, and that it wouldn't be making a system that is not easy for people to seize power in that way and kind of mess around with kind of like things that have been done and repeated in terms of like the peaceful transition of power, and then being, you know, not talking about overstaying your welcome. All those things are kind of being subverted. So I think people want that healthy, robust, rigid system, but also one that works too. It can't just be rigid and robust. It still has to be able to totally change every election to represent what people want at that stage, I guess. So it's a good goal to work to. And I think it makes people, I hope it makes people value what is happening in Canada and what has been built.
Yeah, and I think it sounds really depressing to say, but we're in sort of this age of democratic backsliding. Like there are democracies that are becoming autocracies, that are losing institutions, that are losing you know, fundamental rights and freedoms. And I think that is happening to a degree, and a lot of experts think that is happening south of the border. It's very scary. I mean, Jason, so there were a couple of academics who are experts in this field who have recently decided to move to Canada and go to University of Toronto. And one of them is a fascism expert named Jason Stanley. And he actually said that he believes that Canada is one of the front lines in the world right now for the global struggle for democracy, which is like a very profoundly like scary and also just unreal, surreal, I guess, like place to be. But I really think that like there are so many values that Canadians have that could make us like could make us leaders in this space. I think if we just decide that that's what we want, I think that Canadians value things like fairness, and like these are things that we could build into our democratic institutions and structures, and like we can leave behind some of these things that aren't serving us as well anymore. And I think that to do that in an era where a lot of places around the world are losing those institutions and those rights because they were too rigid, like to your point, they couldn't contain you know, contain the will of the people, or like people lost faith in them, so they moved to other things. And like that's always what happens. We know that's what happens. So like how can we do something differently and preserve, you know, all this great progress that we've made over, you know, our existence.
Amazing. So where can people access your resources, information, volunteer, donate, whatever it is you want them to do?
All of the above. You can find us online. So, our website is apathyisboring.com, and we have all of our resources there. You can follow us on social media at apathyisboring on probably pretty much anywhere you are. And then also we have all of our resources available in French too. So you can
very cool.
En français if you'd like. And yeah, come pledge to vote. Get your friends to pledge. Talk to your friends and loved ones about the election. And don't forget to vote.
Don't forget to vote. Thank you so much for coming on the show again. We'll do it again in another 4, 5, 6 years.
Thank you, Sam. This has been amazing.
And thank you, guys.
Dear listener, I haven't convinced Reese yet, but I will. 28th, we're doing a live election coverage like we did last time. One of our listeners is giving us free chicken like he did last time. It's going to be great. The evening of the 28th, I'm going to say 7 o'clock Atlantic Standard Time. I'm just picking that number out of the air. Is 6 o'clock better for you, Reese? He's going to say no, but I'm going to convince him. So
it's got to be when the election is. We can't choose the time of the live stream, Jesse. The live stream is when the election is.
Well, that's a. Oh yeah, all right. I don't know how this fucking works.
I think the polls close at 7 p.m. Atlantic time. No.
Do they? We were doing it late last time. We were going.
Or 8.
I know because there's time zones.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. We'll update it. So at some point, the 28th, we'll be doing this on YouTube live. Come and watch us. There'll be music. There'll be guests. There'll be chicken. It'll be great. The 28th live election coverage, number 2, baby.
Maybe. Thanks, Sam.